This is the Ropen Radio Network, broadcasting from the heart of Oregon in Salem at the Capitol. Welcome, my fellow Oregonians and CC Media viewers everywhere. And if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, welcome. Appreciate you joining us. So the last recent expedition went really well. Sometimes when you're out investigating, you do not expect for others to join in or someone who might possibly point you in the right direction. It did go that way, I'm pleased to announce. We found somebody that was located on the property in Enfield, Illinois. Well, before I go into any more to come. Got a full documentary coming on that. We've got an individual who came forward and was willing to be heard and seen. We're working on CGI for that, as well as a bit of different other animation to try to tell this story and help it come into fruition. We're doing something a little bit different on the network today. We have two authors. I'm very proud to have on this network. I've taken the time to read both books, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. Now, my first guest has been here before, and you'll probably recognize him, but he has been on this network back, I think it was last year. He currently lives in Texas, and he was on this network because he had an encounter with a pterosaur in Texas by the river. He has recently written a new book called Metroplex Monsters. He's my guest today. His name is Jason Mclean. Let's welcome Jason back to the network. Jason, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, the thing wasn't activating my my camera.
Okay, no problem. I was wondering if that was on my end or was it on your end?
Well, at first I was like, hold on. I thought I pushed all the buttons, and normally with Zoom, you have that little bar at the bottom, and it just didn't pop up for me. So I had to kind of make it happen. So, but
that's
we're good
okay.
now.
I mean, we're actually still trying to get the hang of Zoom as well. Our studio is opening here real soon, actually in the next 2 weeks. So that's exciting. But we've been using Zoom for a while. We're still trying to get the hang of it, and it's working out pretty well. But there's some things. It's a learning curve, so it takes time to learn.
Absolutely.
And how you been, sir?
Oh, I'm groovy. Can't complain at all.
Good. And everything's okay with your health? I remember a while back you were kind of ill there for just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm perfectly fine. Everything is great.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I have in front of me Metroplex Monsters that you wrote.
Yes.
So this is a very, very exciting
and
book.
illustrated, yes.
And illustrated. I was going to ask that question, but yeah, I was guessing that was the case because it's beautifully illustrated, and there is a lot of topics here about encounters that I think a lot of people are not familiar with, that you've done your own research, your own investigation on, and done really, really well. So I'd like to get into that. I'd like to talk about this book and share it with the rest of my fellow Oregonians out here.
Well, I appreciate it. Firstly, it's glad to be back on the show.
Thank you.
It's always a lot of fun to hang with you. So the book, it's sort of a love letter to, just in a broad sense, to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It's my hometown. It's where I grew up. It's so a lot of it was sort of an excuse to get a bunch of history and tell some of the stories that people don't hear about. Like, everyone knows about the city of Dallas, but no one knows about DeSoto. No one knows about Lancaster. No one, has ever heard of Cedar Hill. So it's sort of a chance to, or Italy, Texas, right? And to tell a lot of these stories, and also to tell the story of Dallas in maybe a slightly different way. Not just, how everyone's sort of familiar with how it, once it became the home of J.R. Ewing, everyone's sort of familiar with that. But it's like, how did we get here? How did we sort of become this third coast idea? So a lot of that history is very passively sort of explored to sort of set the tone. But then, yes, absolutely, the book is about a lot of these very, very strange encounters that, including my own, that for a lot of people, you'd be like, this is Dallas, Texas. It's like the 7th largest conurbations in the United States. Home to over 7 million people. Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is home to a lot of industrialization. This is not the middle of nowhere. And yet we've got Bigfoot, living pterodactyls, and clearly supernatural entities running around. And the thing is, you poke the surface. Like most people will be like, "Oh, this is all crazy talk," but you poke the surface, and you run out of, and you there's just no running out of people who've had these encounters.
Yeah.
In fact, several of the encounters in the book came from people I've known for decades, and I sort of took some time off to write the book. And once people knew that I was a biblical paranormal researcher, once I sort of went more public with that, a lot of people said, "Hey, by the way, let me tell you this story." And I'm like, "I've known you for 20 years. How have you not told me the story before?" But
That's how it goes sometimes.
Exactly. But the problem is just a lot of these stories aren't accepted either in churches or by mainstream public. So everyone just sort of says, "Okay, well, I can't talk about it." And the problem is, everyone's had these experiences. It's like if as an aside, I do have a Monday show that focus on cryptozoology and things like that. And from again, I bring thank you. Yeah, it's called Texas Front Porch. I try to bring a Christian perspective to it, and put it all within a biblical context when I can. But it's one of those things where if the one thing I've really walked away from all this with is if we accepted people's willingness, or if we were more willing to accept these stories,
yeah,
you'd find out way more people than you realize are having these encounters, and we could maybe make something of them. But yeah, no, there are encounters in there that I was really shocked to find when I started doing a little digging. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was pretty shocked to see some of the stories that were in it too. I mean, you hear about some of these accounts, like one that kind of pops out to me that I find extremely fascinating because it's one of those encounters that just hits you because you don't expect it. It just comes out of the water and there it is. It's the Trinity River.
Oh, yes.
On page 114.
Yes.
I love that account of he's just out there fishing.
Yes.
And
it is a strange account. That one is like the top, is definitely the top three of the ones that I was the most surprised to find and actually hear and be able to sort of validate to a point. So the gentleman is out. It's actually I spoke with the gentleman's brother. The dude who actually had the encounter, he does not talk about it anymore. He wants nothing to do with it. He's like, he's just, it scared him.
Yeah.
But this creature that he very much accounts it to an ichthyosaur, right? It's sort of like the reconstruction of this, of a what is supposed to be an extinct animal called an ichthyosaur, which is basically, for those who don't know what an ichthyosaur is, imagine something like a cross between a dolphin and a dinosaur. Is basically the best way to think of it. So but it's clearly not an ichthyosaur because it has a long neck. But he's just out there fishing in the Trinity River. The Trinity River so again, just to give some context, the Trinity River is the main. So there's two major rivers in the state of Texas, right? One is the Brazos that goes up on sort of the outside of Fort Worth. The other is the Trinity River, and it has four main sort of starting points. They're the forks. We have the Elm Fork, South Fork, that kind of thing. But they all sort of bleed together around Dallas into what is called the Trinity River that goes all the way out to Galveston and into the Gulf of Mexico, right? It's a major waterway. It is absolutely, it used to be used for navigation. That's why Dallas is where it is so it could be right off of the Trinity River. And it was basically it's how everything got to got out to sea for shipping and down to Houston for up until very, very recently, until the coming of the railroad. And that's also why Fort Worth sort of became as popular as it was as a destination as well, going up the Chisholm Trail. So this is not a small river. It's not the Mississippi, but it's not a small river either. And so this gentleman, he's out there fishing, and he's just fishing for the things that are natively there: catfish, bass. Also, we do have alligator gar. Well, these, and again, for everyone who knows, and I do talk about alligator gar of unusual size. This, and to a point, they do kind of look like the creature he sees. However, the creature he sees is as big around as a 55-gallon drum. Mm-hmm. And it raises its head while he's just sitting there fishing, minding his own business. It raises its head out of the water and looks at him. And the head's over 3 feet long. This is not an alligator gar. So it's just too big. And it's a different texture. It's a different color. So he knows, because he knows what alligator gar looks like. This is not it. And this is way too big even to be a giant alligator gar.
Yeah.
But it just looks at him. And he's terrified. He just sits there.
I can imagine what that's like when you're out there and suddenly just something comes out of the water and looks at you.
Yeah. And he's like, this thing's big enough. You just grab him off the ledge. He's like, no one's ever going to know. But he was too terrified to move. They just sits there and sort of looks at him and then just goes back into the water. Now, from me, like, I mean, the dude, it just terrified him. He went and told his brother, his younger brother, but like he won't even tell a story anymore. He's like, it scares him too much. His brother's the one who's looked into it, and obviously that's the best account that I can find for that particular creature.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads me to believe that this was maybe a visitor. This was not something that was native. Like, it's probably something that came up, that swam up from the Gulf of Mexico, because there are plenty of accounts of sea monsters in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, there was a well documented event where a woman just outside of Houston had sort of gone out, and her boat basically was capsized because it hit something, but it was too shallow to be a whale, but something came up out of the water, knocked her entire boat over, and just swam off.
Yeah.
And so there we have other accounts of very large sea monsters being seen going back to the 1800s. So this is probably something that came up. Now, what is it? I don't really know, but I suspect, given the fact that it was able to raise its head as far as it did out of the water, and again, it had a really long neck, I'm thinking this may be something closer to like a living mosasaur.
Yeah.
Again, for those who don't know what it is, a mosasaur is essentially it's not technically a dinosaur. It is a marine reptile, but it dates back to what we would call the dinosaurs. If you saw Jurassic World or the sequel, the water monster that jumps out of the pool to eat the shark, that's a kind of mosasaur. They were whole species. They come in different sizes and different shapes, but given that it comes as far out of the water as it is, that requires a lot of leverage. So my thought is it may be something like a mosasaur, which isn't too terribly surprising, because we do have plenty of accounts of mosasaurs being found even in the modern day, or being observed by ships, cruise ships. There's an infamous story of a U-boat that blew up a tanker, and basically blew when this tanker the ship had sunk. The engine blew up underwater and actually blew a mosasaur out of the water, and it writhed on the surface for a while in front of the entire crew. And they described it as being 60 feet long and looking like an alligator with webbed feet. Well, it's like that's.
I do remember that account. What was that?
Yeah.
The U something atrocity.
Yeah, exactly. It was a U-boat, so it's the U something. I can never remember the designation.
Yeah, the certain numbers.
But plenty of people have described a creature that looks like that. In fact, if you look at the sort of dragons, again using quotation marks, on old maps, there are often depictions of creatures that look just like a mosasaur. So yeah, so for me, again, if I was a betting man, and my luck is too bad to ever bet, but if I were, my assumption is that this is probably some form of a mosasaur. And again, it's so odd that the guy is so scared of this thing. He's not making it up, but he's one of, honestly, hundreds of people who've had these weird encounters.
Yeah, I can understand why he wouldn't want to talk about that too, because sometimes it's so traumatizing for them that they'd prefer to just move on. They'll tell their story and just leave it at that. Sometimes they won't even have something recorded. They'll go to someone they can trust, and that's it's a good thing that they did come to you, because it's important. It adds the credibility to the case. But
there were only a few people who were willing to give me their real names. Well, let me rephrase this. I know their real names, but they were like, look, for the book, please use an alias. Only a few people, but a few people were willing to give me and use their real names, because they're like, look, I saw this. I want people to know that this is a real event. This is something that actually happened to a real human being. This isn't something that's fictionalized.
Right.
So they actually did give me their names. They're very brave for doing that.
They are.
This is something that a lot of people don't understand, is when you do come out and have these sort of encounters, there are very strange humans have a very strange reaction to this. There was an infamous story in the late 60s, early 70s of a child who was attacked by what appears, by all accounts, to have been a giant condor, like a pterosaur.
Yeah.
Again, just imagine a condor, but the size of a bus. And it attacked the child and tried to take off with him. He was like 7 or 8. His mother actually fought it off. Happens in front of the entire, it happens in a neighborhood. He's playing with his friends. So people saw this occur. Well, they went public with it. The kid was clearly injured. He still has scars to this day. But people started terrorizing him. They would leave dead birds on his doorstep, and he got the name Bird Boy at school. People would tease him for being. I'm like, and so like he doesn't even talk about it. He's been scarred for. I mean, not physically, but also emotionally scarred for life. And so when people come out and have these encounters, they are subject to ridicule, to just being constantly humiliated and doubted. Even when, again, this kid had numerous witnesses say this event happened. He was physically attacked, and yet people were still mocking him for years after it. It's insane. So the fact that there were people who were willing to come forward with their full names, I'm in awe of that. I appreciate what they did, and this gentleman is one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's just, you have these encounters. It's like, what do you do with that? And again, we need to hear these stories. So I was very appreciative of that particular story.
Yeah. And there's so many good ones in here that, for a lot of people who are listening and watching, highly recommend this book. There's so many accounts that are extremely fascinating that I just never heard of before. And that kind of just opened and broadened the horizon for me. Another one that comes to mind, that this one's really odd, but this is something that tends to be it talked of as folklore and more myth and legend. But if somebody is seeing this thing, it's worth investigating. It's called the lechuza. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah.
This is very strange. This reminds me of a piazza bird, or potentially Jersey Devil style creature, where it's a chimera effect, where it's a half something in this. Can you enlighten me more about this story?
Oh, absolutely. This is the top one for me. Because I'm actually, let me be frank, it's almost tied with the White Rock Lake goat man. But so let me talk about the lechuza. So the woman in the story is personally known to me. So when she told me the story, again, I'm like, I've known you forever. How did you not tell me this until now? So when she was a kid, she was staying with her aunt. Well, her aunt was a curandara. In fact, she comes from again, I'm a Texan, never trust my pronunciation for anything. But her aunt was the curandara for the region. For those who don't know, a curandara, it's an oversimplification to call it a witch doctor, or to call them a witch doctor, but that's what they are, basically. They're folk healers. They practice a synchronistic version of is sort of like Santeria, but not, right? So you're going to have some Catholicism mixed in there. You're going to have some, Caribbean voodoo mixed in there. You're going to have, sort of traditional, Hispanic witchcraft in there. And so it's a mixture of all these things. So she comes from this line of curandaras, and she was living with her aunt. There's unfortunately some things I can't say about it that would really just make your mind blow. But she had some issues, growing up. But she was with a friend of hers, and they were out late, just hanging out at the McDonald's in Oak Cliff, and they're hanging out, and that was when McDonald's actually closed, right? So that's how long ago this was. So it's mid-90s. They're just hanging out, but their friends work there, and so they always let them stay. And so, but they're like, hey, we got to go. So they're going home, and while they're walking, so it's her and her friend, they realize it's really quiet, like too quiet. Because this is, for people who are unfamiliar with Dallas, Texas, Oak Cliff is basically downtown Dallas. Like, it isn't truly downtown Dallas, but it is, right? Particularly in the 90s. In fact, this is only blocks away from where Oswald hid. The Texas, the Texas theater where he hid out at is literally just within walking distance of where this occurs. So this is again, Oak Cliff is not downtown Dallas technically, but it basically is. So this is not a quiet or dark area, right? You've always got, particularly even at midnight, you still got people particularly in this particular area at this time. You've got gangbangers, just blaring their music all times of night. The sky never gets dark there. It's at best purple because of all of the ambient light, right? So it's never dark, it's never quiet. But they start noticing it's quiet. Like, they can't hear anything. They're going, and of course they're paying a little bit more attention because they're going past some sketchy housing at this point. And then they start noticing it just seems darker than usual. And they're like, this is weird. This seems really weird. When the trees, these massive oak trees that have been there for decades, one of them all of a sudden, it just sounds like something the size of a horse slams into it and starts shaking. And they're like, the heck was that? And then but they don't hear anything else, so they just keep moving. Then, as they keep moving, a few seconds later, another tree. It sounds like something slams into it and shakes it. Well, they keep walking. This keeps repeating. Now they're getting scared. And her friend's like, you know what? This is because you come from a family of witches. Good luck. And she runs off the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To which the individual this happens to just screams, I better not be dead in the morning. And so she basically realizes, okay, so she pulls out her switchblade. Because again, that's what you want to have if you're a girl in this neighborhood. So she starts moving a little bit faster, and all of a sudden she realizes this thing is definitely coming for her. And at one point, she's getting close to the house. She makes a break for it. All she knows, she doesn't really see how big it is. She just knows this thing flies over her and lands in the oak tree in her front yard. Now, I've seen this oak tree. It's a big oak tree. It starts to bend from the weight, and she's using her knife to bang on the windows to let her in. Her aunt comes out wearing this apron that she has with all these little pockets on that she keeps all of her enchantments and things in.
Mm-hmm.
She screams, basically, don't turn around, and starts throwing these charms and swearing in Spanish and casting spells in Spanish. But of course, she does end up turning around to look at it, and she sees it. And she describes this lechuza, as most people describe it, basically an owl the size of a human being, but with a woman's face. And it's looking right at her. She gets upstairs. The aunt finally gets her inside, strips her clothes, including her brand new Doc Martens, and any child of the 90s knows how important those were. Ostensibly, they were burned, but she's like cracking eggs and still swearing and throwing enchantments on her. It's like, take a shower, and she's dousing her with all these things. But from that night on, for about a week, no matter where she was, she would hear the rustling of feathers or the tapping on a windshield or on like the window. This thing, this clearly supernatural entity, was following her for about a week, and then it finally seemed to leave her alone. But the main thing for me was, it's not just that this occurred. There was another sighting of something very, very similar in that same area. Now, she was targeted, so I think this has to be connected to her history. But the thing about it is, the more you look at the story of Akurandara, they're often thought to be either under the control of witches or a transformed witch themselves. Well, play that back. You go back to a couple thousand years, and the Greeks call them harpies. They're the same thing. And historically speaking, you can find very, very similar accounts. Same thing with the White Rock goat man. Well, what is it? It's a man, and people see them physically. It's a man with a goat, like with a goat body and horns. Broad daylight. People see this thing. that was, again, it's like, well, great, but you go back and it's to the Indo-Europeans, to the Indo-Russians, that's the Leshy. You go back to the Greeks, they're the fauns. For the Romans, they're the satyrs of the Greeks. These creatures are seen everywhere, and they seem to retain certain shapes. So the question becomes, are these things assuming forms that we're familiar with, or is this what they really look like? Or have they followed us here? Have they always been here? These are the sort of questions that these stories really sort of evoke, and they're just amazing encounters.
Yeah, and I can't say that they're just myth and legend anymore because there's so many connections here.
Mm-hmm.
Going back, it looks like I have a photo here, and everybody's going to see this. Ancient Babylon depicts something of this sort. And when you see these things in Egyptian hieroglyphics and in
Yes.
ancient cultures, this tells me that this isn't just something they created. This tells me something they may be seeing with their own eyes. I mean, we see depictions of dinosaurs all over a cave drawing or caves. You see them on the walls in Babylon and other places like that.
Yep.
And they clearly resemble sometimes a Stegosaurus and other things. If they're seeing that, then what's to say they're not seeing this thing too? And this is
exactly.
This is a topic I touched on a while back because it goes so deep that a lot of people are just quick to ridicule others because of what they believe they saw. But I believe there's something legit going on here. The question is, what are they and why are they here? And why are the different forms? What's going on there? Like if you go on with, if you look into like the Canary and other things like that, and some people actually believe them to be ancient beings. But from what ancient beings did they come from? Are they the offspring of something far worse that is trying their hardest to be, in a sense, like us? And as a Christian, and with all the fellow Christians, everybody thinks, oh, you guys are being ridiculous. There's nothing about that in the Bible. Is there?
Oh, yes, there is.
Yeah. Basically, we know about that. So the more and more I read my Bible, I tell everybody the more and more Baptist I become. But
so okay. Again, just deviate from the book for just a moment. I think really that's why these things are shunned the way they are. And I'm going to be real honest. I think this is one of the reasons the church has not had the effect it should have had over the last century. We have, honestly, we've sort of separated ourselves from the supernatural. Call it paranormal, call it whatever. But this is why I started the Society for the Investigation and Research of the Unknown. In fact, if anyone wants to know anything to do about me, my website is finally back up. It's sirupapers.com. You can find all the links to my books there, to my shows there. But I created Siru, and we're doing, as often as we can, videos that sort of explain these things from a biblical perspective. But I have to ask the questions like, okay, paranormal, supernatural, it's all the same thing, just different words. People like to use interdimensional. Great. Tell me how that separates it from supernatural, right? It just sounds like it's a Star Trek phrase for a biblical term, right? That's all it really is. But if you don't believe in the supernatural, then do you believe in the Bible, actually? The entire Bible is an account of supernatural after supernatural event. It's about a supernatural figure and his subsequent, lesser beings interacting with us. That's the entire point of the Bible, is that there is a higher supernatural being that's all powerful. And guess what? Some supernatural beings are good, some are bad. That's the entire point of the Bible. Jesus is an entirely supernatural figure. Yes, he's a human. I'm not saying he's not human. He's man, but he's also God. He healed, he raised from the dead. He takes on our sins, dies, is resurrected. That's how we get to go back to God. The entire story is supernatural. If you're like, yeah, but there's no supernatural things happening here. Demons are sort of a metaphor for your badness, or yeah, they're real, but they don't really interact with you. Then you don't believe your Bible. Straight up. And I would argue that the fact that if we actually talked about these things more, we would understand, oh, no. Spiritual warfare is not a metaphor for reading your Bible. It's not a metaphor for, just being a good person. It is a real, legitimate thing. I would argue from any number of ways. I don't want to get too specific, but there are I think there are a lot of people who die every year because of interacting with these creatures in ways that we don't even realize we're doing. And these things, I'm not saying this all happens all the time, but it
Yeah.
is happening. But we've allowed atheists to sort of dominate the mindset of what reality, like, well, these are the people who know what reality is. This is what science is. Science doesn't tell you anything. Scientists tell you something. The problem is if the scientists that you're talking to are removing information, and they are, then they're not telling you the truth. They're telling you propaganda. And that's the problem. The church gave all this over to the realm of the scientist decades ago.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to do anything with it. The problem is we've left it in the hands of people who have a political and, yes, supernatural or a spiritual agenda. Atheism is as much a spiritual, religious viewpoint as anything else.
Yeah.
And when they omit all of these encounters, when they omit these stories, when they deliberately just say, oh, these are all fake discoveries, and they just hide them as frauds, when you find human footprints with the dinosaurs, when you have when you find unfossilized dinosaur bones, all these things occur. They're like, no, we don't want to deal with that. Then you're not getting science, and that's the problem. The church has become weak because we're not doing these things. In fact, I would argue one of the reasons we're seeing them, I think, more often now than we did 100 and so years ago, is because the church isn't doing what it was supposed to be doing in the first place. We're supposed to be the kingdom coming and actually supernaturally conquering this place. That's the entire point. It's not a metaphor, but we haven't been doing that. We've restrained ourselves from the supernatural, and now these things are coming through. These things are they're getting more and more brazen, and that's why we're having these stories. That's why a book like mine could even be written. You go back 100 years, people weren't necessarily talking about lechusas. They weren't talking about goat men being seen. They weren't talking about wolf man. Dog man basically just became a thing in the last 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any accounts of that 50, 60, 70 years ago. I can't find encounters of like, say, succubi since the Middle Ages, but now I've got a dozen accounts of people who are literally seeing succubus. So it's like we've allowed this to explode because we haven't pursued this. Again, that's not the point of the book. The book is, again, it's a mainstream publisher, so I kind of had to pull back a little bit on it. But from a Christian perspective, these stories, the fact that they're here, is a problem because we're not doing our job, and it should be a wake-up call to everyone that our world is much more closely related to what the Bible says it is than what mainstream media and science would like you to think that it is.
Absolutely. I like the fact that you clarified that. I think we have to probably separate, like prehistoric creatures, or per se, from that mix, because I believe they've been here since the beginning of time. Because
they're supposed to be.
We have a fossil record for them. We don't have a fossil record for some of these supernatural beings that are around. But
if it's talking to you telepathically, like if it's talking to you telepathically, if it's moving through walls, that's not a natural being. That's a supernatural entity. If it's invisible and following you into a movie theater and you can hear it rustling it's not a physical. So here's where it gets weird. I can't say it's not physical because it was clearly affecting those trees. These creatures do have physical effect in the world around us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're not natural though. They're not flesh and blood creatures like us that live, breathe, procreate, die like a dog or cow. The mosasaur, at least again, the possible mosasaur in the Trinity River, the pterosaur that I saw, and the pterosaurs that other people have seen in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and possibly even Bigfoot, although I'm getting more and more on the edge on that one, because of some of the things that we've encountered in our research. But definitely, possibly, at least some of what we think is Bigfoot. These are natural creatures. They're just animals. They have maybe an amazingly low population. There are reasons for them to stay hidden. Like with my pterosaur, I thought it was, and literally everyone I've ever talked to thought it was like a crane or a pelican, right? Something of that nature. The only person who thought it was an owl was because she was driving at night, right? And so they're large. But almost everyone, when we see them in daylight, the first thought is, oh, it must be a crane, or it must be a pelican or an egret because
They're
of how
looking
they
for the
fly.
logical explanation.
Exactly. They're not unusually large. They have a wingspan of 8 to 10 feet, at least in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. But they fly with that sort of S curve with their neck, right? And, an egret and a crane will have their legs sticking right out behind them, so that sort of simulates the tail. So that's what we all think we're looking at, and then we get a closer look. And then we realize there's no feathers. There's no beak. It's not the feet sticking out behind it. It's a tail. But they're similar colors, similar shapes overall. So I think, plus they seem to be mostly nocturnal. So that's why they stay hidden. Again, very small population. They're probably not out as often because they're reptiles. They're not having to eat as often as birds do, right?
Yeah.
So they're probably only coming out once or twice a month, maybe once a week at most, to feed and do what it needs to do.
Especially during the summer months.
Exactly. And they may even be migratory. They may only show up in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in southern Oklahoma region, because we do have them coming from southern Oklahoma as well.
Mhm.
They may, like the ones around here, may only be juveniles. Like this may be where the larger ones come, they breed, and then they leave. And then what we have here are the juveniles. They get to a certain size, then they leave. And because we do have accounts of larger ones down around the Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah.
In fact, for years after I had my encounter in DeSoto with a pterosaur, a rhamphorhactoid, I never believed it. Even after I met Ken Gerhardt and knew about all of the sightings of pterosaurs in Texas, I'm like, but that's all South Texas. That's North Mexico, Southern Texas. That's not Dallas-Fort Worth.
Right.
And then I started doing research, and I had no problems finding people who'd had these encounters. That's when I realized they're here, but they're able to stay hidden because they're not all over the place. They're mostly nocturnal. When they do see it, and most people are just too busy driving or on their phones to recognize what they're looking at when they do see them, because they do kind of look like other things.
Yeah, we tend to be looking straight forward most of the time in our daily routine instead of looking upwards. And sometimes you do look upwards and you notice something more. As I've been doing a lot more stargazing, I'm noticing some strange lights that are appearing just overhead. And they do make some very strange turns. They will dive and they'll come back up and they'll form together as well. The fact that I'm seeing that is just amazing. And it makes me think more about the pterosaurs that are out there, that they do go in groups, and that there is a good size. There's a good amount of them out there. I don't think there's a large amount, but there's a fair share amount of them to this day that are still out there. And, we have a lot of people who are coming forward and willing to speak about it, but we also have people who are on the truly negative side, who are just dismissing it completely because they're supposed to be extinct since 165 million years ago, per se. The issue is sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, "Hey, Jake, why is it that these people aren't going to the Audubon Society and going to Fish and Wildlife?" Well, let me shed some clarity on that just real fast. I got a chance to speak to a representative, House District, I think it was 49 or 48. She worked 20 years in Fish and Wildlife. I asked her, if somebody sees an unusual looking flying bird or creature, should they report it to the Audubon Society or go to Fish and Wildlife? She said, you always want to call Fish and Wildlife because Audubon doesn't always, get back in touch with you. They do not always respond. And if they do, they're going to sweep it under the rug because they think it's ridiculous, especially what you tell them. If you tell them there's no feathers and it's a flying reptile, they're not going to get back to you. That's coming from someone with experience of 20 plus years in Fish and Wildlife. Think about that. Very important.
Oh, and I'll, again, from our own research, I gotta be vague a little bit on this. Unfortunately, I'm not trying to be obtuse. It's just the nature of what we do. But we've had a number of people come to us and say, who work, as park rangers, who work in Fish and Wildlife, and they're like, look, we do get these stories. We can't do anything with them. We just can't. Because again, and fundamentally, I would argue the reason, and this is again, I wrote a book called "How Bigfoot and UFOs Prove the Bible is True." This is the point. These creatures, both the supernatural and the physical, these cryptids, these paranormal entities, they validate the fact that the Bible is accurate. that the world the Bible depicts is real. Because let's be, I mean, the 10-second or 10-cent tour of this is, if the Bible is right and the Earth isn't billions of years old, but only some number of thousands of years old, because there's debate on this,
Yeah.
and that a lot of these creatures were wiped out in a global catastrophic event. That, again, as creationists will say, that's why they're fossilized. Then some of them would have survived on the ark. You would expect there to be animals that came from the other side of the flood that came over here but didn't adapt, right? Maybe some of their offspring adapted, but some of them didn't. Some stayed. So they're going to look very weird to us. This is why we get mythological creatures like dragons, which are just living dinosaurs in most cases. And I make the argument that the wyvern and the Ramphrecto pterodactyl are the same creature. They're obviously the same creature because we have depictions of them from the Middle Ages. It's like, okay, in the 16th and 17th centuries as well. It's like, well, at a certain point, we got to say, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? We've got accounts of unicorns, which appear to be just the Lasmitherium, which are the giant woolly rhinoceros. There's actually a depiction of one on it was found in Nineveh. I believe it's called it's the black stele in Nineveh. It's just right there with a bunch of other natural, normal animals that we know today. And a lot of people say, well, it's just rhinoceros. Well, that may be true, but the rhinoceros, but an African has two horns, one at the tip, one in the middle, and the Indian has it at the front, and it's very, very stubby. This one has the horn in the middle of the head, which is right where the early Greek fathers who were getting accounts of where even the word unicorn comes from originally is from the Greek monoceros, and it's coming from this area. Well, they say that this thing had one in the middle of the forehead, right in between its eyes. Yes. This is where the unicorn comes from. So we would expect these creatures to exist. We would expect, if the Bible is accurate, there would be demonic, meaning the spirits of the dead Nephilim, that they are the ones that take over humans' bodies. That's the power that they have. But that there would be other, more powerful, higher authority, supernatural entities doing numerous things if the Bible is accurate. And it is. And that's what this book really basically is describing, is both physical or material, natural animals that the mainstream science says doesn't exist, and the supernatural. But again, what's the importance? The importance is your Bible is accurate. Yes. And you really do need to believe what's in there, because that's the world you actually live in. It's not the world that MSNBC and CBS and even Fox News tells you it is.
Yeah, you said it correctly. Yeah, without a doubt. People just need to read their Bibles more. And I usually prefer the King James Version, but it really comes down to just reading. Just open it up, read it. You're going to find out that it's going to open your mind to a lot of things and your heart.
Fortunately, my book debuted mid-COVID.
Okay.
So we couldn't really do anything about it. I was able to take it out to like the Jefferson conference, the Jefferson Bigfoot conference that year, but that only had like half the people showing up. I'll be there this year as well. But yeah, unfortunately it came out mid-COVID, so that really restricted what I could do with it. From a publicity but it's got a decent showing. For History Press, they're saying they're happy with it, but obviously more would be better. So now that COVID's over, hopefully we can do a little bit more advertising and get out to a few more places. The problem is this is very much seen as a niche sort of thing, right? Too many people say it's a Dallas, Texas only thing, and it's like, no, it has broader appeal.
Yeah, it does.
And it means it really should. It would mean more. The problem is, I think too many people are really afraid of it, and not this book in particular, but the entire subject, right? Because, and I think even churches, the problem is, once you accept these stories are real, you have to do something about it. And I think too many people are really happy living blissfully ignorant of the world they actually inhabit, because, again, I think to a point it removes the pressure off of them. It's oh, I can just go to church every Sunday, sit in the pew, and I'm done. I can do, I get to do my Beth Moore, women's devotion, and then that I'm done. I've done my Christian duty, and God's happy with me.
Yeah.
No, that's not what the Bible says.
No.
That the Bible is very clearly it's very clear that is not your job. Your job is actually to be on the front lines and to understand the warfare that we have to do is real. This is I'm not saying blow things up. I'm saying spiritual warfare is more than just going to a church every Sunday. You've got to live it. You've got to understand that we're even in a war. Most people think that this spiritual warfare is just a metaphor for life, and it's not. It's a real thing that we've got to be engaging in. These things are becoming more and more prevalent because we've gotten weaker. We're not doing the things the church used to do.
Right.
It's straightforward.
I think every man is responsible, man or woman is responsible for leaving something of what they've taken from this world, doing something for the cause. This is a great book, ladies and gentlemen. I highly recommend you check it out. The accounts in here are, just like I mentioned, something I'm not familiar with. There's quite a bit of them. And I'm really, really amazed with how many accounts are in Texas, but really shouldn't surprise any of us. It shouldn't. I mean, there's things out there in this world that we just don't know about that are starting to surface. It seemed like they surfaced a lot more in the 1970s. Every time I look at an account, there seems to be something about the 70s that's coming out.
Yeah,
the
Metroplex
Monsters.
70s. Yeah.
That's the name of the book, Metroplex Monsters.
Available everywhere.
Reading. Yeah. Totally enjoyed it. Still enjoying it. I read it from time to time, and the accounts are great. And that's all by Jason Mclean. The illustrations too. Did a great job in illustrations.
Oh, thank you.
So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Jason, thanks so much. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor again, pleasure. And I'll never forget that sighting that you had when you told me about that back last year, I think it was.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah. But the fact that it was only, I think you said it was 6 feet from your face.
Yeah, 5 feet.
Across your path. Now, when you think about that, guys, a pterosaur, Rhamphorhynchus of some sort, 6 feet from him, I don't think someone's going to make that up. It's pretty darn clear when it's right there, that close to you.
And just to back up, I kept this to myself for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. I kept this is a big point of like, I even said, I didn't believe I still didn't believe I saw what I saw, even after talking to Ken Gerhardt, who's basically the Texas pterosaur guy. Like he's basically all of the winged humanoids and all, like he's the aerial specialist, but I knew him. I had read his books. I was very familiar with all of the South Texas sightings, but there wasn't anything about North Texas. And I'm like, this can't be real until very, very recently. And then to find out Southern Oklahoma, Georgia, but everyone sees and says the same thing. They all look the same. And I'm like, I clearly didn't make this up if people before and after me are seeing and describing the same creature. These are real things. And the problem is so much of this is real. And so much of this is simply disregarded by the mainstream because it does fly in the face of this mainstream Darwinian narrative. Yeah. But I really appreciate you having me on. I loved your show. I love doing your show. I really appreciate you giving me the time to come on and talk about this. Because again, the book is fun. I love it. It's like I said, this one is, it's a love letter to my hometown. But if people can realize that this is real, then the obvious point is that the world the mainstream media is telling you is a lie. It's a candy-coated, produced thing. And if that's a lie, then what they're telling you are is a lie. And then it's one more step to then, okay, maybe these things mean the Bible is true. And then, like you said, read your Bible, believe the Bible. Because this is the world you actually live in.
Yes, it is. That's what it's come to, and this is what we're seeing. So a lot of credible accounts here, a lot of credible people around the world who are coming forward and finally just having a chance to speak to us. And we don't ridicule, we don't scoff at them for what they are telling us. We're ready to listen and just confide in them. Real fast though, Jason, you have a Bible study that you do
Yes,
on
I
Sundays.
do.
Or actually, you've been doing quite a bit.
Yeah.
More on Sundays.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Thursday nights and Sundays, I do try and keep them slightly different. So Thursdays we're usually going through something like we're going through Genesis right now. But with certain events that have happened in the world, we've had to kind of stop and just do some hangouts and talking about stuff. Sundays are a little more topical. But we're getting ready to do a review of the feasts of the Bible. But yes, it's a Bible study. We do it from, I'd like to say, it's just a Bible study, but it is a community. We are praying for one another. We are doing things. A lot of people, unfortunately, because of COVID, are stuck at home. Their churches just aren't meeting, or they live in an area where there are churches, but they're not really Bible believers, right? And so it's a Bible study from the position, again, that the Bible is true and accurate. We actually just did a big thing on, again, getting into the text, trying to understand the text from the text's perspective, from the author's perspective, getting into, so Michael Heiser's research is, features prominently in what we do, as well as a bunch of others. We want to get back and say, what does the Bible actually say from that perspective, so we can understand it? Because so much, I would argue, of the things that divide the denominations are based on the fact that we're not arguing what the text says. We're arguing over what other people say other people said about the text. So we want to get into the text ourselves, do the best research we can. And yes, we do believe Genesis 6 is a literal thing. It wasn't a metaphor. We do believe that the Bible is real, but we do believe that it's written in particular ways. We need to understand it, not from a 21st century perspective, but from a first century perspective, or a 1000 BC perspective. We need to understand the culture and the context in which these texts were written, so we can understand what they're saying. And once you do, there are so many things that open up. And when you understand the literary allusions to things like the Book of Enoch, to the Apocrypha, once you understand that those quotations are there for a reason, what they're saying, what they're doing, a lot of things just fit. But the puzzle pieces all start to fit. The questions that you have, a lot of these things just sort of be like, oh, there's no problem here. There's no question here. There's no conflict here. Everything just sort of snaps right together. And we're having a good time doing it.
Good. Excellent. And the name of the show is Not Another Bible Study?
Yes, it's Not Another Bible Study on YouTube. I don't have a link to it on my Serial Papers site because I do kind of want to keep it a little smaller, right? But it's Not Another Bible Study. If you want to find me on Texas from Portugal, just go to serialpapers.com. You'll find me there.
Awesome. And thank you so much for the autograph book. I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. I'm happy to do it.
Great voice, great American. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. You have a great one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jason Mclean, everybody. Get set up here for the next round. All right. My next guest is another author. He currently lives in Arizona. Now, a lot of you out there are probably very familiar with his work, but I was not familiar with one that was published back in February of 2020. He recently reached out to me and said, hey, might want to check this out. I'm glad I did. Just to give you a little bit of feedback about the book, for decades, a terrifying flying monster has been reported throughout Indonesia. It is known as the Ropen, the local term for demon flyer, a survivor from prehistoric times. It is large, deadly, and hungry for human flesh. When fishing boats go missing in the Java Sea, Jack Rastun, Karen Thatcher, and their team of monster hunters from FUBI are brought in to track down the beast. They soon learn that there is not one Ropen, but an entire colony. But standing in their way is a group of activists determined to preserve the Ropen by any means necessary, with politics and social media outrage tying his hands. Rastun must find a way to overcome his human adversaries, or watch the demon flyers devour the population of an entire island, along with him and his team. But let's give him a chance to introduce himself and tell us more about his books. Please welcome my guest today, John Rust. Welcome to the network. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on. I appreciate it, Jake.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the series of books that you have. I was familiar with one of them in the past, but I didn't realize that you had so many. So congratulations on that. A lot of books here that I'm sure brings a great audience to it, because this is a field of research that people are just crazy about. They like cryptids, they're fascinated by it, and you tell a great story here that actually keeps me engaged. I feel like it's an action movie combined with other elements to it. So really, really nice.
Well, thank you very much. And I mean, that's kind of my format whenever writing these things. And I mean, let's face it, I grew up in the 80s. I was big into action movies. A lot of the books I read in the 80s were all these Cold War, World War III type action novels with lots of explosions and action in them. And I kind of carry that over into my Jack Rastun and Karen Thatcher novels.
I can see that. Yeah, I was wondering about it too, because when I see some of these characters, I'm wondering if some of that just comes from you. You put some of your feelings towards it into these characters to help give them life.
Yeah, I do. And again, I mean, Jack is a former Army Ranger. He's a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, so he has a lot of that experience going for him. And while Karen does not have any sort of military experience, she's been a wildlife photographer for years. She knows what it's like to be in the outdoors. And as you can see in the book, Karen does have a little as the Emperor Caesar said in Monty Python's The Life of Brian, a little spirit, a little bit of daring do.
He said that well.
Thank you.
Well, John, what I'd like to do before we begin and get into the book a little bit, I'd like to know a little bit about your background. What made you start this series involving cryptids? So I'd like to get into that first.
I'll be honest with you. I have had an interest in cryptids since I was a kid. So anyone who was around like in the 70s growing up then, they probably remember a show called In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy as the host. And every week it was a different thing. Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs. And then I started reading some more books involving them and then watching more documentaries. I think another one was Sightings back in the 90s that did a lot of stuff regarding cryptids, paranormal. And then, of course, now that you have YouTube, I mean, you can find dozens, probably even hundreds of channels that delve into cryptids, delve into the paranormal. And it all started with my first Jack Rastun novel, Sea Raptor, which deals with Jack and Karen and the FUBI trying to find a sea monster along the Jersey Shore. And I actually just dreamt about it one night many years ago with this group of people along the Jersey Shore looking for a sea monster. And then I started writing, and I can't even count how many rewrites I went through with Sea Raptor until I finally got it to the point where I felt, you know what? I think this is as good as I'm going to get it. And let's just release the thing. And it started out as a self-published novel and did pretty well on Amazon for about a year. And then that's when Severed Press, a small press down in Tasmania, that book went on their radar. They thought it would fit in well because Severed Press, most of the books they deal with are about cryptids, like Bigfoot and anything else you can think of. So I got a contract with them, and Sea Raptor has probably been my most successful of the 19 books that I've published, soon to be 20. Yeah, I just finished up doing the editing and revising for another baseball book I have called Pennsylvania's All-Time Baseball Team.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a 25-man roster of players born or raised in New Jersey. But after Sea Raptor, it's like, well, I really loved how these characters developed. And I was like, there's no way I'm not going to use them again. So after Sea Raptor, it was Reptilian, which deals with the South Carolina lizard man. And then the next one, Ropen, or Demon Flyer, which of course deals with the Ropen. And the third book was kind of a funny one because I probably went through 3 or 4 different cryptids for the plot of this. I think one of them was giant spiders, which, there have been reports of in both South America and Africa. And, well, this is probably going to be funny for people to hear, but when I wrote that version of the third book, I just didn't find the giant spiders very scary. And a lot of people with arachnophobia going, what are you talking about? Spiders are really scary, but not here. I tried
Just ask
another.
McG. Just ask McG, who wants to have a spider in all his movies.
And then I tried another one with the Mclean Bendi, the supposed brontosaurus or patasaur that has been reported in the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't develop the way I wanted it to. And then I was watching one of those YouTube channels that deal with cryptids and other paranormal things called Unexplained Mysteries. They had an episode there about Ropen sightings, and I went, maybe I'll do that. And hence, that's how I got to Demon Flyer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it seems like the Ropen has become quite interesting for a lot of investigators, especially myself, is why we chose it as our mascot for this network, because not only have we had so many people see this thing, I mean, just a living pterosaur in general, but there are so many things that are associated with the Ropen now that we're coming across that potentially they could be poisonous, potentially, or making a strong case for, they have the ability to illuminate from their bodies, which is quite odd and strange for a lot of people to grasp, especially paleontologists. But this is where I believe we need paleontologists and cryptozoologists. You know, we need two sides of the spectrum to help get the information out there. But yeah, so I was wondering about that, how the book came about. I mean, it sounds like you heard about it, you were extremely fascinated by it, and then it just took off. Pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And who isn't fascinated by the idea that prehistoric creatures could still exist in the modern day? Yeah. And I know, like, a lot of cryptozoologists like to point out the coelacanth as an example of how creatures from millions and millions of years ago that we thought extinct could still be out there in the world. And when you look at a place like Indonesia, and I know I mentioned this a few times in Demon Flyer, you look at Indonesia, this is a country made up of, I think, 12,000 different islands. From, the big ones like, Jakarta, Sumatra, Borneo, to like little itty bitty ones that may not even be a mile in size. But you think of all those islands, and you think about all the jungles you have in Indonesia, and who knows what could be hiding there. And the Ropen isn't the only alleged prehistoric creature that has been sighted in Indonesia. To me, it was just the most interesting one of the bunch. Yeah. And that's why I went with it for Demon Flyer.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that this is a terror in the sky, basically, although there's very, when it comes to, in reality, of course, there's very little accounts of the Demon Flyer actually attacking people. There's some that are mentioned, but for the most part, it seems like they kind of keep to themselves. But I mean, when you think about it, when you see something like that, of course, it's going to terrify you to your core, because it's something exotic and it shouldn't be alive today, but people are seeing it, and they have different names for it, like Ndava or Kor, all along the islands of Papua New Guinea. But beside them, they're also seeing potentially iguanodons in the area. And then further north, when you get to Australia, they have the Burringer, which is a living tyrannosaurid of some sort, out there in Arnhem Land to Queensland, which is quite terrifying. But the natives out there are seeing them along certain areas of the deep forests and out there in the middle of nowhere. So quite fascinating stuff. And just to be able to tell a story involving that, and then bring it to my attention, too, because I had no idea that this book was out there. So I'm glad you brought that to my attention so I could have you on the network and we could talk about it. I think, though, John, some people are wanting to know, because this all comes from, when you tell a story, it's got to come from somewhere. And it's like, how do you get motivated to do it? What brings out all that imagination to be able to put it together? It seems kind of tough for a lot of people just to put it to paper. So can you give us an idea how that begins, how the whole anatomy of it comes to begin and turn into fruition on paper?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, first I saw the documentary about the Ropen on Unexplained Mysteries. So that gave me the seed for the idea. And then after that, one of the things I like to do is, I'm a huge walker. I walk about an hour a day. And a lot of times what happens is when I'm walking, that's when I'm plotting out novels in my head, which is kind of funny because I walk around town and people who know me might wave to me and say, "Hi, John, how you doing?" And I'm in my own little world plotting this out. But so I have my featured cryptid in this book of, the Ropen. And after that, you start going into, okay, well, what is the Ropen going to do? Who is it going to threaten? What is the response of Jack and Karen and their team going to be? And then it's what other obstacles would they have to face in this? One of them is this big fishing company on the island that they're exploring that is in conflict with the smaller fishing village. And another one is a group of environmental activists who want to preserve the Ropen at all costs. And then that leads to that, talk about ripping something from today. That leads to a lot of social media outrage. So now Jack has to deal with this. And basically all Jack wants to do is like say, I want to find this creature, and the ones that are killing people, we have to destroy them. And the other ones that haven't killed people, we need to find a way to preserve them. That's all he's interested in, but he's getting so much pushback from so many other things that it makes his job tough. And again, it goes into that, whole thing of, doing conflict, giving your characters just one challenge after another that they have to overcome. And how are they going to overcome it? How is someone with the personality and experience of Jack Rastun, of Karen Thatcher, of Dr. Aaron Bergen Geek, how are they going to deal and cope with everything coming at them?
You brought up something that's really interesting. I think we're on the same page with this one, because you said you walk around, you've got the ideas coming to you. You just go for a walk, you go for about an hour. That's how I do things too. I'm actually just out and about, and I'm constantly thinking to myself, and people actually walk by me and they're like, "Hey, Jake," and I have no idea who just passed me because I'm focused my own little world and I'm trying to concoct these things. And people are like, "Why didn't you say hi to me the other day? I just passed right in front of you. Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was thinking." They're like, "Oh, thinking about what?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on the next documentary or person I'm going to speak to next." Like, "Oh, so I should just jump in your face and get your attention." Then I'm like, "Probably, because I probably won't recognize you or notice you at all." So it's nice to not be alone on that. Maybe not in the same way, but still, I see where all of it comes from. Like I said, you got a great story here and a great imagination of how you put it all together. I think that's where it begins. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids today who forget how to make that happen, or forget what it is to have that imagination and bring it to life and tell your story.
And I think you're right there. And again, I think this goes to the dual sword of social media, the dual sword of tablets, where you can just get information, you can just get entertainment, off a screen, be it a movie, be it a video game. And again, I mean, when I was a kid, I'd go out in the backyard with my toys, and I'd make up my own little action movie or what the heck ever. And again, you got to use imagination for that. I don't think imagination will ever die in the human species. I think maybe fewer and fewer people might have the kind of imagination that an author will. But I mean, we need those people with imaginations to tell stories, to generate new myths. But for me, I've always had an overactive imagination. Obviously, with my books. In fact, the last fiction book I wrote was a time travel novel about about a regiment of U.S. and South Korean tankers going back in time to stop a present-day North Korean unit from going back in time and stopping the Battle of Incheon in 1950. And time travel is just another thing I'm fascinated by. So I think that hopefully we can get more people to get back to reading. I know here in my town, I've done Read Across America days. There are a couple teachers around here who are big into like getting campaigns together to provide their children to provide their students with new books each month. I've donated to those campaigns as well, because, I think, honestly, I think if you read more, that is going to spark your imagination. It's easy just to sit back and watch a movie for 2 hours and really not think. But when you're reading, I think you're more engaged. You can get more in depth with the character. You can get into the character's thoughts and feelings, and then you might even go away from the novel kind of thinking past the novel. It's like, well, what's this character going to do now that this story is wrapped up? It's like, this character, I still feel like he or she, I'd like to see someone in their life. I'd like to see them do more, maybe to get out of this, some of these bad feelings that they've had. What are they going to do to try and, will they try to get out of them? So like I said, I think, just reading will spark that kind of imagination. I know even when I read something, it helps maybe light up my imagination or kind of give me an ideas for like, hey, maybe I should take this example from a book and maybe apply it to my next novel. Or, oh, hey, this character reacted that way. And this character is a little similar to Jack or Karen. So maybe think about that for a future novel.
Yeah. Yeah. There is something I want to ask too, when it comes to writing. I think some of the things that most people are trying to figure out is how do you add in your elements? Like, for instance, when you're reading a book, it says he put the coffee down or he put the mug down. And some people might actually skip over that, maybe reasons why they're not writers. But you put those things into your stories, all the fine details. Is that something, let me ask you this then, I guess. Maybe you took courses in writing in order to get you to those stages.
Well, actually, it's not so much courses. I've been part of writers' critique groups for 20 plus years. And one of the big things that I learned in those critique groups was, don't have your characters always go, he said, she said, put an action in there. Something like, well, I don't think we should do this. And then have something like, Rastun put his arms on it. Rastun put his hands on his hips. Karen flicked the hair out of her eye or something like that. Just to give it some kind of action, so that way it's not just one line after another. He said, she said, he said, she said.
Understand,
and again, it just makes them a little more active. And sometimes that's what real people do. We say something and we'll have a facial expression. Okay. We say something and we'll like move something over to the side or something like that.
That makes sense. And it's funny how we can easily get off of that because we're thinking words and words only, but it's actually action as well, because it's almost like keeping your audience engaged. Mm-hmm. If you focus on one thing too long, you might lose them. So you have to switch it up. And by using different elements, different actions and feelings, things like that. So you're right. Spot on. Yeah. John, when you mentioned some of these people with backgrounds in military, do you yourself have a military background?
Actually, I do not. I am just a huge military history buff. And when I was first putting together Sea Raptor, one of the angles I wanted to come at was in a lot of these books where you have someone go off and try to find cryptids. Usually it's the scientist who's the main character. And in a lot of these stories, the guy they bring along as security, basically he's just a musclehead. He's just a one-dimensional character saying, we must kill monster bad. We're here with Sea Raptor. I went, well, what if I took the security guy and made him the main character, but instead of him being the typical monster bad, monster must die military guy, give him some added background where his parents run the Philadelphia Zoo. He worked at the Philadelphia Zoo in high school and college, so he's kind of a self-taught animal expert. Mm-hmm. And Jack really only wants to kill these cryptids as a last resort. If they're threatening people, if they kill people. If they're not doing that, then he's all for, hey, trank them. We fit them with some kind of GPS collar, so that way we can keep tabs on them and research them. That's great. But if they're threatening or killing people, well, then we got to do what we got to do.
Right, kind of like the Reptilian series. Without giving anything away, guys, I'm not gonna. But I remember as I was reading Demon Flyer, they mentioned the Reptilian book as well, because that actually probably took place before Demon Flyer, right?
Yeah, it did. It's the way the series goes. Reptilian was probably about 8 to 10 months before Demon Flyer took place, and again, that's where they go off to South Carolina looking for the Lizard Man. And again, they, as you saw with Jack, he's like, hey, it would have been great if we could have just studied these creatures, but when they come out of the swamp and they start tearing up the town, I mean, what other choice do we have than to unfortunately put them down?
Yeah, then you have people are like, hey, holding up signs saying, you can't kill these creatures.
Yeah.
It may be killing my grandma, but I'm not going to kill it.
But when you think about it, it's almost like what you'd see, say, a state game and fish department do. Like here in Arizona, where, we do have mountain lions, and mountain lion, I mean, anywhere a mountain lion attack on a human is very rare. In fact, I think my 25 years in Arizona, off the top of my head, I can maybe think of maybe like a handful of mountain lion attacks in that time throughout the entire state. But when that happens, Game and Fish has to go out, find the mountain lion and kill it, because they don't want it attacking any more people. So that's the approach I come at when I deal with the FUBI and their attitude toward cryptids.
Yeah. I like that approach too. I want to make sure I was saying that. I was saying FUBI, basically, right?
What was that?
Is it FUBI or FUBI?
Oh, I just say FUBI.
Oh, FUBI. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would make sense, because otherwise it sounds like I'm eating sushi. Okay. So we got two characters here that are the main. Well, actually three. We have Jack Rastun and Karen Thatcher. And they're the ones who are out to try to investigate what's going on. Well, I want to say this though about the book. This is what really captured me, is the fact that people in the world already know these things exist. Okay, so they're aware that cryptids are out there and they're real and people are seeing them. Unlike today's world, where it was like, that's nonsense. But the book actually gets you going into that. You're like, oh, this is cool. This is something I'm not familiar with. The fact that they're already existing in the world, people are familiar with it. We just don't know what's going to happen. So that's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, because the whole reason why the FUBI came into existence, it goes back to Sea Raptor. And it was a year before the events in Sea Raptor, where a hunter in California stumbled across an injured Bigfoot. And I was like, okay, well, now we know Bigfoot exists. And if Bigfoot exists, these other cryptids might exist too. So that's how the FUBI came into existence. And Jack's involvement in it was after he was, let's just say, did not leave the army of his own accord. He was kind of drifting a little bit, unsure of what to do, because being a ranger is what he wanted to be since high school. And now that he doesn't have that, he kind of doesn't know what to do with his life. And one of his former COs in the Army Rangers started working with the FUBI, saying, hey, look, we're sending these field expedition teams out there to look for Bigfoot and other cryptids. But the problem is, we've got all these poachers following them around. And now not only are they threatening the cryptids, they're also threatening our field expeditions. So we need people who know how to take care of themselves, protect other people, and know how to work in the outdoors. And well, like an Army Ranger or an elite soldier would be perfect for that. So that's how Jack gets involved with the FUBI. And of course, through that, that's where he meets Karen. They start dating. And of course, here in the book, by this time, they're already engaged.
Yeah. I like the fact that there's a teamwork thing here. And then he starts to gather more of his team members to get him on board. But then I think for Jack, he runs into adversity because there's somebody else that I forget the name of the character in this book particularly.
I think it might be Marquez.
Marquez, yeah, because Marquez was familiar with what happened previously, and they were just getting fed up with the fact that they think they're just out there eradicating all kinds of cryptids, but they're not. They're trying to control and save people because these things, let's face it, they're killing people.
Mhm.
And they're, unfortunately, the demon flyers have gotten a hold of people because maybe their own substance that they're feeding off of is low, like the fish in the rivers, it's low. And that's why they're going after people and attacking them because they need something else to go off of, another food source.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons. Like it kind of starts off with there was an oil tanker spill in the Java Sea. And kind of like you said, that would certainly affect the ecosystem and affect the Ropen's food source. And well, when they don't have fish to chow down on, well, here are all these boats going around the Java Sea. And fishing is, of course, a big industry in Indonesia. So you can't eat fish. Well, here's a bunch of people that they can eat. And like you said with Marquez, he, I guess, kind of doesn't see that, or if he does, it's like, well, hey, Ropen's got to do what a Ropen's got to do, and we shouldn't interfere with that. Where meanwhile, Jack's on the side of, look, we can't have the Ropen going around and like eating up all these fishermen because then no one's going to want to go out and fish, and if that happens, well, there goes a big chunk of Indonesia's economy and the livelihood of thousands and thousands of people.
Right, right. So it's like, okay, we got to find out which creature it is that's going after people and try to eliminate that, which is a tough task for these characters because there's more than one. There's a bunch of them, and they're out there just, living off the food source of human beings. And so it's like, okay, which one is it? Well, it turns out that it's more than that. And it's like, again, it's like I can't really go much further because I want people to be able to read the book for themselves. But I think we can probably skip over to this. There's a scene too where to add more to the credibility of the story, there's a girl. She was out in the woods or with her, I think it was her fellow students. I think it was.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go into that one just a little bit because that one, that whole part in the story actually just pushed it even forward because when you're reading the story, it suddenly bang, something happens and you didn't expect it to jump so quickly, but it does. It's kind of like when you're watching one of those well-made, unless people like M. Night Shyamalan or not, but sometimes there's these great stories that the creature just jumps at you and you weren't expecting that. And it just makes it more exciting and more enticing, especially for a reader standpoint. So she's out there with her group, and then I think there was maybe a few of them together, and then something happened where suddenly it just comes into view. The creature comes into view and starts attacking them.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where when you're dealing with the monster story, sometimes you got to up the body count, and but you want to up the body. You don't want to make it gratuitous. You want to up the body count, but kind of like you said, make the story go forward. Up the stakes, up the ante. And that's what happened when I had these Dutch students on their foray in Indonesia wind up getting attacked. And then when Jack and Karen find out about it, it's like, well, we got to go. It's like, this is a Ropen thing. So now we got to go out and we got to try to locate this group of students and, maybe find the Ropen along the way.
Yeah. And you actually did a great job of adding something else in there too, because they were talking to family members of one of the deceased, and they were wrestling with whether this was secondhand stories just being passed down or whatever. So the investigation part of it comes to mind for everybody else who's in this field investigating these creatures. When I started reading that part, I'm like, oh, he put a lot of thought into this, because you're right. Sometimes when you're talking to someone, those stories are handed down to another person, and you're like, oh, well, it's just third party or second party people are telling me these accounts. Are they credible? Well, the bottom line is Jack decided he was going to investigate anyway, because he found that still that's the only thing we got to go on. We got to push forward.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing I really enjoy doing with these books, putting in the mystery element, putting in the investigation element into it. And I think that's how it would go, because I think for anyone who's either interested in cryptids or researching cryptids, you can't just take every single story you hear about a cryptid for granted. You kind of have to look into, well, who is the person telling the story? What are some of the details of the story? Is there any other corroborating evidence to go along with it? And that's the approach I use with Jack. That's the approach I use with his U.S. Marshal friend, Sherlock, who of course comes in and usually gives a hand whenever there's a law enforcement or mystery solving element in there as well. And I think that, to me, that just lends more credibility to the story, where they're actually not just stumbling across things, they're actually doing investigations, they're actually maybe questioning the validity of the witnesses, or saying, well, this guy has had a really good story there, and when you take in some other examples or some other bits of evidence, he might be onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us investigators, when we're out there, we never expect to see anything, but when it does happen, when we have more people come forward, more credible reliability, it just adds to it. It makes it that much more enjoyable. When I was a kid, the first thing I wanted to be was an explorer. I wanted to get out there and explore. The thing is, I wasn't sure what I wanted to explore. And then this came along back in, I want to say it was probably 84. I watched a movie about a living sauropod in the Congo called Baby Secret of the Lost
Yep,
Legend.
I saw that one too.
Well, a lot of people found that to be a very weird movie, but to me, it made sense. It clicked because when I was growing up, I was raised in a very conservative Christian home. And, we believe the Bible to be truth. And we believe dinosaurs lived with man. So with this story of dinosaur sauropods still alive, I'm like, well, that clicks with me. So I went and saw it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, you look at it now, you're like, yeah, rubber suits and stuff like that. But still not too bad. I was fascinated by the story, and it was what set me off and pretty much set me on my journey up to now. And it's been like that for the last 20 or so years, just investigating, having fun, meeting people such as yourself, and fellowshipping with everybody, and making it that much more enjoyable, and having a voice in the community and giving others to have a voice to share what they know and what they've learned. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, maybe I'm not a researcher or a field researcher or anything like that, but the subject of cryptids, it still fascinates me even to this day. As I said earlier, I mean, I've been fascinated since I was a kid. I haven't gone out looking for them, but any kind of story I can tell, I love it. In fact, my day job is being a sports reporter, a play-by-play announcer for one of the local radio stations here. And the other week, I was doing play-by-play for a game with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and Spring Arbor for women's soccer, Spring Arbor from Michigan. And I managed to drop in a reference to the Dog Man in that broadcast, because I was like, hey, man, they're from Michigan. I'm going to do whatever I can to plug the Dog Man, which I think is just another fascinating cryptid we have here in North America.
Oh, maybe that should be another story, huh?
Actually, the Reptilian story, that was originally going to feature the Dog Man, but there were some elements in there that I wasn't quite satisfied with, and then I switched over and made it the Lizard Man. But you never know. One day, I may do a Dog Man story. I probably should, because that is a pretty cool cryptid.
Yes, it is. It's basically a werewolf, very terrifying, and I can tell you this, it's real. It's, I mean, a lot of people are stunned to hear that. They're like, oh, come on, Jake. I'm like, nope, I'm sorry. I've seen enough. I've heard enough, and I've read enough to know what's really out there. And that thing's real, and it's frightening. And it's never a good case when people come across it. It's horrifying. And it's like, stay clear, because that's not something you want to come across. And they come in different sizes. They come huge, small, 6 feet, anywhere to 10 feet as well. It's pretty massive. But yeah, that'd be an intriguing story. You already got me you got me hooked now. I'm going to be going out and getting the other books too, as I keep reading on. I mean, I was going to say, John, you've got the voice for broadcasting. That's for sure. I could.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to have to listen into, if I ever get a chance to be able to hear you do a live broadcast with a game, that'd be sweet. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, actually, our radio station's online. It's kyca.info. And we also have past live streams of my sports talk show called Tri-City Sports Roundup, and past live streams of games that I've done play-by-play for on KYCA's Vimeo page. So anyone else who's interested in hearing me talk about sports, and hey, sometimes I'll drop in a heavy metal reference, or like I said, sometimes a cryptid reference. I think there was one baseball game that I did with Yavapai College, and I forget the other school they were playing, but for whatever reason that day, there were a lot of players who were from British Columbia on both teams. And well, some of them were from Vancouver Island. And of course, hey, Vancouver Island, that's been kind of a hot spot for Sasquatch sightings last decade or so. And guess what I did? Dropped in a reference about that. And there were some people sitting beneath my broadcast position who got a pretty good chuckle out of that one.
I like that. We got a broadcaster who's dropping hints of cryptids here. That's pretty sweet.
And probably they're wondering, where in the heck does he get that information from?
You'd be surprised. We're kind of in the, I hate to say it, but I think we're in the minority when it comes to cryptozoologists. There's so many people who do not even know what this is.
Yeah.
So it's just fun to be able to talk to them about it. And they're like, okay, I won't be inviting you to my party.
I've encountered that too. When I'm talking about my books, or like I say, I make a reference to the Dog Man, to Bigfoot, and I drop the word cryptozoology, and yeah, they kind of look at me like, what is that? And then I have to explain it to them. It's the study of creatures who, mainstream science has not proven to exist, such as Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. Those are the go-to ones, because I think even if you don't believe in them, you've heard of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
You'd be surprised. Some people actually even heard a lot about the jackalope. I hear that's a very famous cryptid, even though it's not brought up very often. The jackalope is really huge.
Yeah. Well, when we had our minor league hockey team here, the Arizona Sun Dogs, one of the teams they played was the Odessa Jackalopes, which I thought was an awesome name.
That is it. I did not know that was a team. I did not know that. Odessa Jackalopes. I'm going to have to go look that up. That's too good. That's too good. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on the network and sharing your book with me. It was a very good book. I had thoroughly enjoyed it. It was nice to see someone do a story on the Demon Flyer, especially this way, this kind of storytelling. So great job. Fantastic. Again, folks, if you're wanting to know, this is Demon Flyer by John Rust. He was our guest today. You can go check this out on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, or wherever books are sold. So get your copy as soon as you can. And I was very fortunate. John autographed mine for me. So that was really cool. Nice touch, John.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it. And, best of luck with everything you do with the network. And, hopefully one day you can find some really good evidence for Bigfoot or Ropen. And, we can finally put to rest whether these creatures exist.
I agree. That would be sweet. I think we're on the verge of doing that eventually. With all this technology and smartphones, people are getting something these days. It's only going to get better. So I think that we have small evidence out there right now. Mm-hmm. It's just we have to really get in the field, stay out there for long periods of time, come away with something like a tracking device that you can hook up to maybe a living pterosaur and study it from there. But they are very real. They're out there, and there's so many people who are continuing to see them. All over the world, in the United States, Papua New Guinea, you name it, they're all over the place. Not a large amount of them, but there's a good-sized colony that's making them thrive, allowing them to thrive and live on. So it's fantastic. Again, greatly appreciate your time. We hope to have you on the network again someday. Stay connected with us. Reach out as much as you like. This has been an absolute joy.
Well, and again, I've had a blast, and thank you very much, Jake, for your time. And you have yourself a good day, and all you listeners, all you watchers out there, you have a good day too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was John Rust, everyone. Cool guy. Thoroughly enjoyed our conversations with two great authors of the books Metroplex Monsters and The Demon Flyer, Jason Mclean and John Rust. It was a hoot having them on the show. Glad they were here. If you have had an encounter or a sighting, a story to tell, or a book you'd like to share on this network, contact me. I would love to hear about it. If it is an encounter, I want to assure you that when you come on this network, you will receive no ridicule from me or my team members. We're here to believe you first and foremost. That's why I created this network, to be a voice for you. All those years of your life, and you're just waiting for an opportunity to talk to somebody about this, to get it out and move on. That's why we're here. I'm not alone. There are others out there who are willing to listen to you. Some great people. The field investigations are still coming. I'm going to be doing more in the future. I've already selected my places. Sometimes it's just spontaneous, comes over me, and I just want to head out. And that's the way to do it. But I will say I'm not a convention guy. I'm definitely a person who gets out and investigates. That's the part that I love the most. And that's why I think someone's going to be taking my place here on the show in the coming year or so. So I can get out more and report back so that they can be the anchor on the desk and show you what I'm doing. That's the goal for the coming years. So again, I really appreciate all of you tuning in. It has been a great show with two authors who I've come to respect and enjoy their books. Ah, what a bunch of great guys, aren't they? So stay tuned on the network. We're going to have more things to come, especially in the month of October and September and October. October is going to get really heated because I've got a fascinating documentary coming that I was recently investigating. It's a lot of fun. Stick around. There's going to be more to come. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you, but very important, seek the truth. Keep your eyes on the sky. God bless every one of you on the other side of the screen. I'm your host, Jacob Guerra. Thank you for joining me. So long.